as many of you know from having come to some other programs, I'm Jay Elias, and I'm the Jay and Elias, and I am the legal counsel over at Dyer Lake Funeral Home down the street. And every month we do these programs on personal wellness and awareness, and they're always informative and interesting bits of information that we try and convey in the span of a little under an hour. So today's topic, I was thinking, you know, what would be interesting to learn that's fun facts, that's informational, that maybe we thought we always knew over lots of years and hearing it lots of times from a lot of different people. What's a myth? What's true? What's fact? What's an old wives' tale, as they used to call them? And I got to thinking, and I started to do a little bit of scratching underneath the surface to come up with some interesting little what's true and what's not true. And so,
Well, that changes.
Do you have any more books, Jay?
I do. I have some more books. So it does change. And if you watch the news, there's the fact, there's the fiction, there's the what's the truth, what's not the truth. So it's hard to tell. But today we're going to try and dispel some facts and myths and maybe reinforce some facts and some myths. So here's a question for you. Okay. First question is it true that lightning never strikes twice? Does anybody think lightning never strikes twice?
No.
Does anybody think lightning strikes twice?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it can.
Okay, and it certainly can. We know that lightning is this huge electrostatic discharge searching for a way to come from the skies to the ground. We know that lightning can strike twice in the same location. It's an old wives' tale that you can't get struck by lightning twice. Perfect example is the Empire State Building in New York. Empire State Building gets struck more than 100 times a year by lightning. So there goes that myth. So lightning can strike twice. Empire State Building, 100 strikes a year. Here's one for you. Does a full moon really affect our behavior?
Yes.
If you go to a yes? Does everybody think yes?
Yes.
Okay, do you think it's documented, scientifically proven that a full moon does affect behavior?
Yes.
No? I heard some no's, I heard some yeses. I used to work as a healthcare attorney in the hospitals, and the emergency room doctors and nurses would always say that when there's a full moon, they get the biggest onslaught of patients and craziest behaviors, and the psychiatric facilities would be crowded when there's a full moon. There have actually been studies performed. And the truth of the matter is a full moon really has no impact on our behavior or the behavior of animals. Some people thought, you know, a full moon impacts the gravitational pull with the earth and with the tides, and that our bodies are made of so much water that when there's a full moon and the gravitation is affected, that it impacts us. It's a myth. It's a myth. Werewolves, wolves, they bay and howl at any moon, whether or not it's full or not. When there's a full moon, we're just more apt to see things that we didn't see otherwise in the night sky. Here's a question for you. Show of hands. Does sugar make children hyperactive?
I think so.
You think so?
Yeah.
Does anybody think sugar really doesn't make children hyperactive? Okay, so
No, it's bad for you.
okay, it's bad for you. It's not great for your teeth. It's not great for your blood sugars. The truth of the matter is, sugar in and of itself doesn't make children hyperactive. There have been a lot of pediatric studies and dietetic studies about children and sugar. And here's something that maybe we don't think about a lot. In the context of when kids are getting that extra infusion of sugar that we think makes them hyperactive, when is it? It's at Easter time when they're looking for the Easter eggs. It's birthday parties when they're surrounded by all their friends and families and they're the focus of attention. It's Halloween time when there's a lot going on and they're all giddy with excitement about all the activities that are going on. Their hyperactivity is more associated with their excitement that they're experiencing than they are with the sugar. Sugar is, I mean, one thought, sugar actually, too much sugar for child or adult is actually more apt to make you drowsy than it is hyperactive. Sir?
Sugar gives you energy, does it not?
Sugar, just like any other food that has calories in it,
Calories, yeah.
makes you energetic. But an excess of sugar doesn't make you hyperactive, doesn't give you extra energy.
No?
It actually can slow you down and make you more drowsy. So a lot of the studies are saying, let's look at the context when the kids are getting the sugar as opposed to the sugar itself. So that's a myth. All right, I have a question for you. Talking about food. Cold day.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, it's a cold day. These gentlemen are doing a little ice fishing in the back of the truck. They're toasting themselves with a couple bottles of beer. Or someone's going to the Patriots football game and they have a little nip, which is probably not allowed, but they have a little nip of scotch in their pocket to keep them warm. Does drinking alcohol on a cold day actually warm your body?
I wouldn't think so.
Does anybody think?
No.
Do we all hear about people who do have a drink to stay warm?
It's brandy.
But it tastes pretty good.
Okay. Tastes good.
It's brandy.
It's brandy. So I should have brought samples today. Although alcohol may make you feel warm and toasty on the inside, you're right. You're right. It doesn't actually warm you. It actually has the opposite effect. What happens is the blood flow goes away from our skin to our other body organs when we drink alcohol, which takes the warmth away from our skin, which makes us colder. So it's an old wives' tale and myth that on a cold day, have a drink of alcohol. Well, let me skip to a little bit different one for a moment and ask you this question. So if drinking alcohol on a cold day doesn't warm you up, show of hands, does drinking something hot on a hot day cool you off? So my wife always says, when it's hot out, that she'd like a hot cup of coffee to cool her off. And I'm thinking, I'd rather have an ice-cold iced tea to cool me off on a hot day. So there's a myth, or an old wives' tale, or maybe it's true, that drinking something hot on a hot day can cool you off. So, show of hands, if you think that drinking a hot cup of coffee on a hot day will actually cool you off, raise your hand. Okay, I have one on this side. Sir?
Never heard of it.
Okay, so you're not willing to vote? You're wishy-washy.
I'll say it will.
All right, just so we have balance
Just-
here.
just-
All right? Is there a reasoning behind why you think it does?
I
Because
don't
I
know
was
why.
told if you're hot and you take a hot shower, it will cool you off, and vice versa. If you take a cold shower on a cold day, it will warm you up, which is probably nonsense, but I figured, why not?
So you're voting that, although it's nonsense,
But all of it's
it works.
nonsense, I think it's true, yeah.
All right, so if
That's what
you're
I did.
you're with her, it's nonsense, but you're going to vote for it anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So the truth of the matter is, if you're hot and you drink something hot, it's going to raise your body temperature a little bit. It's going to make you perspire. It's going to make you sweat. And what does perspiring do? What's the purpose of perspiration? It's to cool you off. It's to put a little sprinkler system in your body that cools you off. So there's one circumstance when drinking something hot will not cool you off, and that's where it's a very hot, humid day. You're in the tropical rainforest, so it feels, and you're not able to perspire because there's so much humidity that you're not perspiring. In which case, this concept of perspiring to cool you off isn't going to apply. But other than that, on a hot day with a nice warm breeze, if you drink something hot, it's going to make you perspire, which is going to cause you to lower your body temperature and cool off. So drinking something hot on a hot day to cool off is a fact, not a myth. So I have a question for you. Let me see where I am on this one. So before we go on to the next one, it's cold outside today. It's nothing like yesterday. Did you all go outside yesterday when it was almost 70 degrees, or did you open the windows at least and get a little fresh air? Today, it's in the 30s. It's going to snow and sleet. It's not a real nice day out. So let's say I go out the door without a coat, and my shirt, and trousers, and no coat, and I go outside in the cold air, and I stay outside in the cold air for 10 minutes or so. Is going outside on a cold day, is that cold air going to get me sick? Am I going to get a cold from being out in the cold?
No.
No.
No. Does anybody, boy, you're all pretty good on this one except for the hot drink. Does anybody think that going outside on a cold day is going to give you a cold or have you catch cold? You're right. And you know what's interesting? The viruses that cause us to catch cold, as we call it, actually thrive in temperatures that are more than 91 degrees. You're more apt to catch a cold on a warm day than on a cold day. So going outside in the cold to catch a cold, old wives' tale. How about the fact that all the heat escapes out of your head? And you need to wear a hat on a cold day because all your body heat escapes out of your head. Is that a truth or is that an old wives' tale?
I think it's true.
You think it's true. Does anybody else think it's true? Then on a cold day, if I go outside just like I am right now, is the heat going to escape from my head, leaving me colder? Without a hat
No
on?
more than any place else.
I planted this gentleman here for the answer. No more than any place else. My body heat is going to escape from anything that's not covered. So if I'm not wearing gloves, my body heat is going to escape from my hands. And if I'm not wearing a hat, it's going to escape from my head. And if I'm all bundled up with everything except for my hat, then my body heat is going to escape from my head. So it's no more than any place else. Here's one that I doubt any of you heard of. And if you did, tell me. What's that woman doing in the top corner? Can you see? Okay. She has an apple in her hands. She's smelling an apple. So has anybody heard this one before? If you're feeling claustrophobic, does anybody here get claustrophobic in an elevator and closed spaces in a warm room? Does anybody sometimes feel a little confined?
No.
No? No one ever feels claustrophobic yet? Thank you. Smelling an apple when you're feeling confined and claustrophobic and just a little like the world's closing in on you. Smelling an apple has been scientifically proven to help reduce the anxiety associated with being claustrophobic. So, think about this for just a second. Smelling an apple. Smelling the apple. Can you all visualize what an apple smells like? When you're feeling a little confined and closed in. Why do you think that smelling an apple helps you when you're claustrophobic? Anybody want to venture a guess? No one wants to.
Is it an
Some
apple
kind of
relax?
acidic,
Makes you relax.
has an acidic.
Just the smell, not tasting it.
I
just the
know, but
smell.
it
It makes
must
you
have
think
an-
of something
No.
else.
Pardon?
It makes you think of something else.
It makes you. What does it make you think of? If you're smelling an apple,
Fresh air.
fresh air. your brain gets tricked just a little bit. You smell that apple, and you smell blue skies, an apple orchard, a fall day, a breeze. You think of the outside. You stop thinking about that confined, claustrophobic space. Just the smell of an apple can trick your brain. One of the things we've learned in a lot of the programs we've done here over the last few months is that there are a lot of things you can do, if you remember, to sort of trick your brain a little bit. Remember, we talked, I think it was last month, about the fact that if you sit up straight, it actually convinces, see, look at all of you now, I gotta sit up straight. If you sit up straight or stand up straight, it actually makes your brain think that you're feeling better and more confident and more upbeat. You've sort of tricked your brain. It's like habits that we form in life. We try and trick our brain a little bit by habits. So this is just like all those other things. Smelling that apple triggers a sensation of being outside. So, it's true. Smelling an apple can help prevent claustrophobia. I think you're all going to get this one right. Can laughing help keep you healthy?
Yes,
Does laughing have medicinal benefits?
yes.
And why do you think? What do you think some of the reasons are for why laughing can help?
Keeps you up and happy.
Keeps you upbeat, makes you happy, actually keeps the blood flowing, relieves stress
Attention.
and tension. There are studies in Great Britain, I'm sure there's studies in the United States, but there was one study in particular in Great Britain that found that laughter, showing patients who were about to have surgeries or were undergoing treatments, that showing them stand-up comedy routines or watching situation comedies on TV or fun movies, or like I Love Lucy, exactly right, sort of mindless humor. It actually, watching those kinds of TV shows and movies, the laughter that's associated with that activity actually has the same effect because it releases endorphins in our body. And endorphins are natural pain relievers. So they found that subjecting patients, if you will, to humor before surgeries and treatments actually relieve pain. It can also help boost your immune system. Laughing can reduce your blood pressure. It stimulates your mind. And actually, it can actually be a good physical workout for your lungs. When you're laughing, for your body, when your muscles contract a little as you're laughing, it's actually a good little workout. So the truth of the matter is, laughing can be physically and emotionally healthy for you. All right, so let's see. You're all doing pretty well on this. So let me ask you a question. Which is it? Feed a cold, starve a fever, starve a cold, feed a fever, starve a cold and a fever, feed a cold and a fever. All right, does anybody have any opinion? Is it starve a cold, feed a fever, or any combination of those two things? Would you all agree we've heard the expression?
Yes.
Okay, so we've heard the expression, starve a cold, feed a fever. Is it true? Do you starve a cold to improve, and do you feed a fever to improve? Or it's an old wives' tale? Anybody?
I would
Sir.
like to guess you
All right.
feed a cold and starve a fever because you're supposed to eat chicken soup.
Okay, all right. Actually, one of the things we're going to talk about in a minute is chicken soup really good for you?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the next thing we're going to talk about. And the answer is yes. But that's right now, is it starve a cold, feed a fever, feed a cold, starve a fever? This gentleman said, feed a cold, starve a fever. Who agrees? You agree. Does you say feed a cold, starve a fever? Does anybody think that it's nonsense?
Yes.
Oh, you think it's nonsense too? Okay, so feed a cold, starve a fever, but it's nonsense. It's just more of an expression than it is anything else. Okay. So, does anybody want to know what the answer is? Is it feed a cold, starve a fever? All right, the answer, does anybody want to know?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, thank you. Feed a cold. Correct. Feed a fever. Correct. Why? Why do you think it is? Because when you're sick and your immune system is compromised, whether or not it's a cold, if you have a fever, you've got an infection going on somewhere in your body. So what you need to do is keep your immune system boosted. You need to get as much energy reserves as possible. So the goal is to have as much energy, which we get through calories, which we get through food. So it's feed a cold and feed a fever.
Feed them both.
Feed them both. Feed them both. Sir, chicken soup. Chicken soup? Is chicken soup good for you when you have a cold?
Yes,
Sure.
Or does it just taste good?
it's true.
Okay. Does anybody think that chicken soup being good for you is just an old wives' tale? It was just something that, our parents made us do just so that we'd eat? Or do you really think chicken soup is good for you when you're not feeling well, especially when you have a cold or something
I
else?
think so.
You think so? Does everybody think chicken soup is actually good for you when you have a cold or an illness?
Yeah.
Yes.
I do.
You
Well,
do.
maybe the grease is good.
All right.
Something to do with the grease.
The grease?
Mm.
The grease and what?
Where's the grease?
And chicken.
Oh,
And the chicken.
all right. That's possible. That's possible. Well, the truth of the matter is some studies have suggested that chicken soup has anti-inflammatory, which are beneficial effects. So, couple of things in play. It's hot chicken soup. The vapor, actually the steam, is actually good for our membranes and our nasal membranes. Some of the spices, including, garlic, for example, if you use it, or the peppers, onions, all these different vegetables and seasonings actually have health beneficial effects. And again, just with the feed a cold, feed a fever, the whole idea that you're introducing calories and content to help boost your immune system, that's beneficial. So, all in all, chicken soup is good for you when you're not feeling well, especially when you have a cold.
I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well. Could someone take me out?
Sure, absolutely. I'm sorry to hear.
I apologize.
No, that's all right. I'll get you some chicken soup.
Yes.
So here's one for you.
Please help me. My name,
No, no.
please help.
They can take it.
They can't take it.
All right, question from when we were all children. Going on a picnic, and you have a big lunch, and there's the pond, or the lake, or the swimming pool, and all you want to do on that hot day is finish your lunch and race to the water. And someone says to you what? You gotta wait a half hour or an hour.
Yeah.
You gotta wait, because what happens if you don't wait? You're gonna get cramps. And then what happens if you get cramps? You're gonna drown. And you're gonna die. And all you wanted to do was just go in the water that's right there. And they wouldn't let you. Was that good parenting? To tell us that we couldn't go in the water for a half hour or an hour after we ate? Do you think it's true that if you go swimming too soon after you eat, that you will get cramps, which will cause you to drown?
I never believed it.
You never believed it because you didn't want to believe it, or because you didn't think it made
Because I
sense?
didn't want to believe it.
You didn't want to believe it. None of us wanted to believe it, because we all wanted to go in the water.
I think it's true.
You think it's true. Does everybody think it's true that it's got to be unhealthy? Makes sense, you're eating, you got all this food in your system, you're doing a physical activity like swimming, exerting, and you're gonna get muscle cramps from what though? You're gonna get muscle cramps because you have food in your stomach?
Maybe if you overstuffed yourself.
Maybe you overstuffed yourself. Well, if you overstuffed yourself,
If
you're
you
probably just gonna sink a little more.
If you just eaten a normal dinner,
So the truth of the matter is, and it's been proven time and time again with lots of studies, that it's an old wives' tale. There is no increase in any health issues, whether or not it's cramps. There you go. Don't you wish you should have gone right in the water? You don't have to wait a half hour or an hour. There's no association between eating and getting cramps and drowning by waiting for a half hour or an hour. Old wives' tale. All right, here's a question for you. I don't know if you can see in that corner. Do you know who this is?
I can't see it.
Okay. Can you turn to your little handouts on page 13? Don't read what it says, because the answer's in there. Just look for the picture on page 13. Do you know who that is? Okay. Can you tell us who that is? Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yes.
All right. You all see the picture of Napoleon Bonaparte?
Yes.
Okay. He was, everybody see that? All right. Don't read it. Just look at the picture. Napoleon Bonaparte was a ruler in what country? France. France.
Yeah.
In the late 1700s and early 1800s. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. What do you think? Does anybody know Napoleon Bonaparte? Napoleon. Okay. Does anybody know any of the characteristics or traits about, what do you know about Napoleon Bonaparte? Anything?
In the brain.
Wait, right there. Say that again.
He was short.
He was short.
Yeah.
Okay. Does everybody agree? We've all heard that Napoleon Bonaparte was short. Wait. I'll get there for you. No. There you go. There you go. Does everybody agree that Napoleon Bonaparte was short? And
Yeah.
have we all heard that people, have you ever heard the expression somebody has a Napoleon complex? Yes?
I never heard that.
You never heard that? Have other people heard of Napoleon complex?
Yeah.
Okay, and generally, it's associated with this concept that, boy, someone who's short, particularly a man, has like an inferiority complex because of his height, which causes him to act a little bit more of a control freak, if you will, to compensate for being short, like Napoleon.
Yep.
Right? You've heard, a lot of us have heard that concept. You know, he's got a Napoleon complex. He's a little person, so he's acting like a big person, and he's just bossing everybody around. Napoleon complex. So, interesting fact. Napoleon Bonaparte, and let's listen to this whole explanation on this one. Napoleon Bonaparte was 5'2". Wait for the whole explanation on this one. Napoleon Bonaparte was 5'2" in French measurement.
Oh, Frenchman.
French measurement, which is the equivalent to approximately 5'6" or 5'7" in both British and American measurements. So, we often, if you had any reading about Napoleon, it would say he was 5'2", and you'd stop your reading and say, 5'2", that's a little man, 5'2". But he was actually, by American standards, 5'6" or 7". But I knew someone was going to say that. So it's still short,
Yes.
which is why I said, wait till I give the whole explanation. So he was 5'2" in French measurements, which is equivalent to approximately 5'6" or 7" in American measurement back in the early 1800s and late 1700s. Okay? Our average height has increased, by the way, by several inches. But here's the interesting point. The average Frenchman at the time that Napoleon was alive was 5'5", not in French, in American measurements. So if Napoleon Bonaparte was 5'7", and the average Frenchman was 5'5", that would mean that Napoleon Bonaparte really was not a short man for his generation. Now, why do we have this old wives' tale about Napoleon and his complex and short men? Because Napoleon Bonaparte looked short because he was surrounded by the French palace guards. One of the requirements to be a palace guard for Napoleon was that you be at least 6 foot tall.
6 foot?
In American size, 6 foot tall. In French, it was like 5, a good 6 or so inches taller than Napoleon, and big and burly. So this gentleman was of average size, surrounded by big hulking men, and one more little thing to put on the equation of why we think of him as short was he had the nickname the Little General. I'm sorry, the Little Corporal. And the reason he had the nickname the Little Corporal had nothing to do with his size. It had to do with the fact that he liked to micromanage and control every little aspect of everything during a battle. So he micromanaged, and so his troops affectionately called him the Little Corporal, having nothing to do with size, having to do with that control freak micromanagement. So Napoleon Bonaparte was not short. He didn't have an inferiority complex. And the nickname Little Corporal had nothing to do with his size.
About my size.
5'6", 5'7"? There you go. We'll call you Napoleon from the rest of this.
5'8½".
Right, yeah. We're all shrinking. So, that is a myth. Chewing on that piece of gum when you were a kid, swallowing an orange seed, heaven forbid, chewing on a piece of gum,
No, she's leaving now.
chewing on a piece of gum, and you swallow it. Truth, and you have. Does it stay in your system for 7 years or a long period of time? Do you have an inability to digest gum for years because it wasn't made to be swallowed? So that gum that you had back in 2011, is it still in you? We don't want to get too graphic. The answer, who thinks that it takes years to digest a piece of gum if you swallow it?
That's
Takes
why
months?
it's short.
Yeah, I never swallowed it.
Okay.
I did.
You never swallowed. You never swallowed for fear that it was going to plug you up forever. Right. The truth of the matter is you digest gum. And what gum you don't digest, you just pass gum like you do anything else. So it's a myth that if you swallow a piece of gum, that you're unable to digest it and it will somehow block your system. Now, if you swallow packs and packs of gum over a course of days or weeks, you're going to have some problems. But an occasional piece of gum, there's no health risk to it.
With the
Same thing with, did anybody have the fear, there used to be an old wives' tale, if you swallow an orange seed or a grapefruit seed, that you're going to have like a growing orange tree over you? Right. No, I don't think so. It doesn't happen. That too shall pass, as they say.
That's why I'm so short.
This too short.
You're so short because all the gum is like keeping you from growing? I don't think so. All right, who's heard of the 5-second rule? Is anybody? Okay, thank you. Maybe it's a generational thing. 5-second rule. You drop some food on the floor. You have 5 seconds to pick it up before any bacteria happens to infest it.
Yes.
Yes, you've all heard of that 5-second rule? Right. Does anybody believe that if you do drop that piece of pizza that you've been craving and it's on your plate and it goes from your plate almost to your mouth, but it's on the floor, 5 seconds, quick, get it, and you save it. And it's okay to do. It's okay to eat it.
No.
Does
Bunch
anybody-
of baloney.
It's a bunch of baloney.
Bunch of baloney, but I didn't do
But you still eat the baloney.
Yeah.
Right. It's a bunch of baloney. Right. There is, the moment that food hits a unsterilized, shall we say, surface, you can get bacteria. Now, the truth of the matter is, there are some foods and some surfaces that make it less likely that you're going to have bacteria on them instantly. So, for example, if I have a hard piece of candy and I drop it on a hard table, like a hard surface like this table or floor, and it's a hard candy, it's not porous, there are not lots of surface holes in it, it's less likely that there's going to be bacteria that's going to attach to that hard piece of candy in 5 seconds or 3 seconds. If I dropped a piece of watermelon on a piece of carpeting, you can all just visualize what that looks like.
Yeah,
Right. What'd you say?
yeah.
Yeah, right. Watermelon, very porous. Carpeting, so more apt to have bacteria grow. But the 5-second rule, no, it's no seconds. The moment it touches is the moment it may be exposed to bacteria. Okay, here's one for you, boy. Pardon?
He said you're gonna eat so much dirt and so much bacteria.
Well, the other theory is that the more sort of dirt that you eat, the more it builds up your immune system.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case.
Just when you're kidding.
Just normal, just when you're a kid. So, bullfighting, red cape, right? Is it the red cape that makes the bull want to chase after the matador? Or is it something else? So, the question is, does the red cape cause a bull to wish to charge after someone like the matador?
I think so.
Yes, you think so? Okay, so interestingly,
Moving out there.
bulls are colorblind.
That's what?
Bulls are colorblind. So why is a bull charging after a red cape? Because the red cape is doing this in front of the bull's face. And the bull's chasing that which is moving the most in front of it. So it's not the red cape, it's the movement of the cape, not the red cape, that causes the bull to charge. Now why is the cape red? Cape is red.
Spectators.
Cape is red because it's a gory sport and there's blood involved when the bull does get picked and gored. And so the red cape hides the blood. It has nothing to do with a red cape causing the bull to be provoked. So, old wives' tale. It's a myth.
Bunch of baloney.
Bunch of baloney again. As long as
That's
it
all
stays
you
off
have
the
to
floor.
remember. It's a bunch of
It's a
baloney.
bunch of baloney. All right, so here's one. Are bats blind? You know, if I take off my glasses, I will say to you unequivocally, I'm blind as a bat. And I am not good without my glasses. So, are bats blind, and do they only know where to fly and how to find those insects that they eat through sonar?
I think so.
Are bats blind, and thank goodness they have large ears with sonar? So, do most of you think that bats are really blind?
I thought they were.
They're not. Bats can see very well. They can see as well as most birds. They just use their sonar for low-level light and flying because they are generally nocturnal, which means that they come out in the evening and at night. The sonar helps them because it's dark. It's not that they can't see like you and I. In the night, we'd have problems too. So blind bats is a myth. Blind bats can see. Okay. We'll do just a couple more. I got one for you.
Learn something all over.
I'm going to take you back to your elementary school days.
Yeah.
Okay. Who was our first president?
George Washington.
George Washington.
George Washington.
Tell me 2 things that you know about George Washington.
The truth, he told the
Ah,
truth.
he told the truth. Do you remember the story of how it is that we came to know that George Washington told the truth?
Was it about a cherry tree?
It was about a cherry tree.
Oh,
So George Washington, very good. George Washington was confronted by his father because one of the cherry trees in his father's orchard was chopped down. And remember what George Washington said to his father when he was confronted by his father? He said, "Father, I cannot tell a lie. It was I who chopped down the cherry tree." Does everybody remember that tale?
Yeah.
That tale, that legend, that myth, that untruth never happened.
He did it.
Pardon? He never,
did.
well, if he chopped it down, he didn't tell his father. What happened was this. After George Washington was a much loved president. He was our first president. He was a general and he was much revered and loved. And after he died, there was a biographer by the name of, and this is all in your handout, a biographer by the name of Mason Weems. People were anxious to learn as much as they could about George Washington after he had passed away. And so Mason Weems wrote a biography of George Washington. And he was trying to come up with ways to make him seem even more virtuous than he was, because the people really loved him. And so he concocted this story. And this story was actually written 15 years after George Washington died. So there was no story, there was no tale, there was no conversation about George Washington and the cherry tree until an author of a book created it 15 years after George Washington died. So that's a little disheartening to know that one of those stories that we've known since we were children, you know, I cannot tell a lie, it was I, Father, cut down the cherry tree. So that's a myth. Let's stay on one more with George Washington. You all know what the dollar bill looks like.
Yeah.
And we all can picture George Washington's face on the dollar bill. So here's a question for you. Have you ever seen you know what? Do me a favor. Turn to page, it's going to be a giveaway, but turn to page 21. This one, that has a picture of the dollar bill. Underneath is a picture of some teeth. So this second question about George Washington has to do with George Washington's teeth. What do we know about George Washington's teeth? They were made of wood. No, they weren't.
They look terrible anyways.
Either way, they look terrible. You know what? Do you see this picture? Those are George Washington's dentures.
Oh,
They're not wood. If you look closely in the picture, if you look closely in the handout, when I tell you that they're made of cow and horse teeth, possibly elephant ivory, a little bit of lead, tin, and some copper alloy like brass. And now if you look, or if you look in the handout, it's the same picture. His teeth weren't made of wood. His teeth couldn't be made of wood. Because if you eat or drink, how long do you think wooden teeth are going to last? Not so long. Right, myth. Funny, the two things that we know the most about George Washington, that he chopped down a cherry tree and his teeth were made of wood. He did actually cross the Delaware River. But those, the wooden teeth, no. These are a picture of his actual teeth. So we're almost done, so I'm going to end on a couple of quick things. Who's this?
Is it Einstein?
That's Einstein, Albert Einstein. So focus today, very superficial program on this one. Let's not focus on his intelligence. Let's focus on his hair. Something I'm sure he didn't wish for us to be focused on, but let's focus on Einstein's poor hair. So, does hair grow faster if you cut it?
Yes,
Yes.
No. Okay?
and mine does.
It doesn't. It looks like it's longer. It looks fuller because you've eliminated split ends, but cutting your hair has nothing to do with the follicles in your scalp that create, from which the hair grows. So cutting your hair does not make your hair grow thicker or faster or anything. I have a question for you. Can stress cause your hair to go white? No. I think I anticipate your answers. No. Hair's going to grow the way hair grows. Do you know how fast hair grows? And then I'll answer your question. Do you know how fast hair grows? Approximately how much a month?
They die.
About a half an inch a month. That's how fast our hair grows, about a half an inch a month.
How about trying to have,
Frightening?
yeah,
No.
well, some people who,
And when they die, it's still growing.
You're
frightened and
No, when you die, it's not still growing, nor do your fingernails continue to grow. And no, you can't get shocked or scared into having gray hair or white hair. It's genetically predisposed.
Okay, thank you.
So, two last things. An interesting story that's not a myth, it's more of an interesting little story. You see what this picture is, or on page 23 of your handouts? It's a picture of a microwave oven. They used to call them radar ranges. Okay? Do you know an interesting little fact? The microwave oven was actually invented by accident. So there was a scientist back in the 1940s, a gentleman by the name of Percy Spencer, and he was working at Raytheon Corporation. He was from Maine, and every day at lunch, he used to like to pack up little clusters of nuts, and make a little, like a nut cluster, and he'd put it in his pocket, and at lunchtime, he would go out and feed the squirrels. Break them up and feed the squirrels. And that was his little habit. So he was working on something called a magnetron. It was a machine that generated radio waves. It was to be used in the military. And he was working near this machine, and after he was done working and it was time for his lunch break, he reached into his pocket for his nut cluster, and it was melted. And so he retraced his steps, and he realized it wasn't melted before he was working in front of this machine, and then it was melted. And he realized that that machine was giving off microwaves, magnetic. And so the next day he came to work, smart thinking guy, came to work the next day, and he brought in some popcorn kernels, really. And he stayed in front of the machine, and they popped. And that began the process of creating the first commercial and personal residential use for the microwave oven. Totally by accident. So the last two sections are this. They're about how to create, actually, well, let me just end it by saying this. Can you really make it a habit? Can you force yourself and trick your body and make a habit out of being happy? The answer is yes. And on pages 24 to the end is ways that you can actually create the habit of being happy. Everything from smiling when you don't really feel like smiling to volunteering your time a little bit, helping someone else, getting into a routine. Habits are all about creating routines without thinking about them, so that our body automatically gets into a certain rhythm. It automatically does things. So you can create happiness as a habit. Some people say, you know what, I'm just a miserable SOB all the time. Well, then you've chosen to be, because you don't have to be. You can think positively, you can smile, you can look for the positive, and probably the single most important thing you can do to make happiness a habit is to surround yourself by people who have a positive, happy outlook. Because downers will bring you down, and people who are upbeat and inquisitive and positive will cause you to be the same. So happiness can be a habit. So the last few pages are just about, you know what, it is true. It's true. It's not a myth. You want to be happy, you can make yourself happy. So this program was just a lot of little bits and pieces of different things, myths and truths and fictions and old wives' tale. And I hope you learned a little bit something along the way.
Wait.
If nothing else, we know that the cherry tree was a myth. So thank you all, and I'll see you next month.
Right.